Hi, welcome to another edition of This Issue. My guest this time is Dud Hendrick, who's a member of Maine Veterans for Peace and also a key leader of the Maine impeachment campaign. Dud, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Bruce. Thanks for having me.
You live on Deer Isle.
I do. Yep.
And tell us, Dud, how did you get started and why did you get started in this Maine impeachment campaign?
For me, it all springs from accountability. When we think about the typical citizen, we know that we have to be called into account for whatever we might do. If we park too long in a parking place or if we speed or any other violation, there is accountability to be answered to. And I feel that the highest officers in our land also must be held accountable. And in this particular case, I believe the highest officers in our land are responsible for egregious acts, and it is my responsibility as a citizen to call them for that, and it's my responsibility to speak to the leaders between me, or between the citizens and the president, to see that they also are accountable for holding the highest. Congress. That's right. Yep.
Well, what would it mean officially to impeach Bush? What does the word impeach really mean?
Well, impeaching really is a process through which officers may be investigated. So it's an investigatory process. And in the respect of the constitutional impeachment process, that falls to the House of Representatives. And if acts of higher officers are to be investigated, that begins with the House Judiciary Committee. And it's simply an investigation at first. And if the House Judiciary Committee finds officers, whoever is being investigated, to be responsible for crimes, then they draw up a series of articles. The articles are voted upon by the entire House of Representatives. And all that is necessary in the House is a majority vote. And if the majority votes in favor of prosecution or further investigation of these articles, then it goes forward. That's called impeachment, and then it goes forward to the Senate. And the Senate has a trial, basically. So
when you're calling for impeachment and you're handing out these bumper stickers calling for impeachment and these palm cards, you have people out handing out these palm cards around the state, and you're asking people to sign a petition, a Maine petition of Mainers, then really what you're calling for is investigation of crimes. And you're asking for impeachment, investigation of Bush and Cheney?
In the case of the initiative here in the state, yes, that's exactly what we're asking for. It's happening really across the country. There's a great broad grassroots movement going on. About 22 states are engaged in some sort of effort to call for their respective state legislatures to examine this and for their respective representatives in the House of Representatives to examine it. So that's very much what it is. We're looking for an investigation to happen.
Why the state legislators? Why get them involved in this thing?
There's something called the Jefferson Manual that dictates how the House of Representatives functions. And within the Jefferson Manual, there are some 6 ways that impeachment may be pursued. And one of the privileged ways, or the ways in which some priority is given, is if one single legislature representing one single state petitions the House of Representatives to pursue impeachment. That becomes a privileged issue and therefore has much more priority within the House Judiciary Committee.
So that's one of the strategies of the Maine impeachment campaign then, is to go to Augusta to try to get the state involved in this issue?
That's correct, yeah. We firmly believe that, and I think as we well know, this war in Iraq, which is one of the major issues that we have a problem with this administration, it having such grievous consequences, has those consequences in every single state in the country. It impacts the state of Maine. So we're trying to bring this message to our state legislators that they have a responsibility. Again, they must be held accountable for the welfare of our own state, for Maine, and the war in Iraq and the things that the Bush-Cheney administration are doing are impacting our state. So it's very well within their purview.
In what way would you say that the war and the occupation of Iraq is impacting Maine?
Well, we have lost, I believe it's now 15 young men or women to the war. They've been killed in Iraq. And of course, it's affecting us economically.
In what way?
in terms of our health programs, our educational system, budgetary concerns.
Okay. So tell me more about this campaign. Tell me about the goals, the petition campaign. Give me some of the nuts and bolts of this effort underway now.
Well, we have a website. It's www.maineimpeach.org. And through the website, those interested may sign a petition, Cheney accountable, determine in their own minds whether they think that they really call for investigation. We're not saying that they're guilty. We're saying that they should be investigated. The consequences of what they have done are of such nature that they ought to be looked at, any citizen. And we maintain that this is an issue of democracy. It's not a partisanship issue. It's a democratic issue. So we're looking for people to examine those things that Bush and Cheney have done. If they believe that they ought to be investigated, go to this website, sign the website. It's not a legal petition, but it will indicate to our state legislators that the sentiment is out there, that we're hoping to get some 10,000 signatures, and we believe that if 10,000 Maine citizens come forward in support of this, that'll have some bearing, it'll have some weight, it'll carry some authority to our legislators.
What's the website again?
www.maineimpeach.org.
Okay. Recently, just January 11th, in recent days, you organized a speak out on impeachment in Belfast. Can you tell me about how that went?
We were very pleased with the way that turned out. It happened to have been the sixth of this sort of affairs. There have now been 6 in the state. And on 2 previous occasions, there were speak-outs in Bangor. 2 of them were down in Portland, and there was one previous one at the Hutchinson Center in Belfast, where we had this one on January 11th. On each occasion, we've been disappointed that the mainstream media hasn't paid a whole lot of attention. This time they did, and I think that's an indication that the sentiment is building. The mainstream media is aware that many more people are in support of, or I should say, are taking issue or having a great deal of difficulty with the Bush-Cheney administration. The 2 questions that we examined on January 11th were, should the United States withdraw forces from Iraq? And secondly, should Congress investigate Bush and Cheney?
And how many people came?
We had over 200 there, and 51 people spoke out, as many people as time permitted, and we had quite a bit of the media represented as well.
And you invited all of the politicians from Maine to come. And what kind of response did you get from them?
I'm glad you asked. It's an interesting point. It illuminates how difficult it may be, it is, I should say, to get the attention of our state legislators. Many of them are of the mind that they should be involved with more provincial matters, with state matters. And for the reasons I previously stated, we believe that this is an issue that impacts every citizen across the country and certainly every citizen in Maine. So we did invite all 186 of our state representatives and senators. We heard back from only about 1/3 of them. And of those 50 or so who did respond, many of them had a very valid conflict. There was a state economic bus tour during those couple of days, actually from the 10th to the 12th. We might argue that this issue should have taken priority, but it's understandable that they had this previously scheduled commitment. Of the others who responded, many clearly were sympathetic. They were very regretful in their refusal or in their response. And there were others who were somewhat dismissive, which in my mind is indicative of a legislator who doesn't really care what his constituents are thinking out there. If we're to look at the polls, we know that 51% in the country are in support of investigations of this administration, 51%.
For impeachment.
Mm-hmm. And that's across the country. That's not just in the state of Maine. We would have reason to believe that there are more in Maine.
And the polls are now showing that over 70% of the American people want the troops to come home now. So clearly there is a growing attitude. In fact, I heard that in the Northeast, 85% in recent polls, in the Northeast part of the country, 85% of the people want the troops to come home now. They're opposed to this occupation of Iraq. But getting on with this Belfast event then, getting back to the politicians that came, what about the congressional delegation, the people that represent us in Washington? Did you also invite them to come to this Belfast event?
Yes, we did. Yeah, thanks for raising that question. On every previous occasion, we have done that as well, or at least we have invited some of the 4 of them, Snow, Collins, Congressman Allen, and Congressman Michoud. And we've been very pleased, frankly, with the response of Congressman Michoud. He clearly is very interested in hearing what the people have to say, and I think that he is, as time has gone by, he's becoming more and more sympathetic with this perspective that we bring. We've been less enchanted with Congressman Allen. He did come to one of the previous meetings in Portland, but he has continued to fund this war, and we are absolutely certain that one way to stop this war is to stop the funding of the war. On this occasion, on January 11th, last Thursday night, he did send a representative, as did Congressman Michoud, and so did both of our senators. So we were very pleased to have them there. The words spoken on January 11th were profound, and they were said with passion, they were said with respect. And we know that these representatives got a real earful. Mm-hmm. Thanks to the services of a good friend of mine who works with Veterans for Peace and is a videographer, Eric Herder, we are making a DVD through which we will be sending the words of these people directly to our congressional delegates and some of the state
legislators. He's also the producer of this show, this issue.
Just coincidentally, yeah, he is.
And we're very grateful to him. Let me ask you this. Part of your strategy then in the coming months is to go out and to hold local workshops on the impeachment issue, like teach-ins in local communities. Mm-hmm. Just last night, I know you did another one of these in Belfast. You've been doing them in various communities. So if people watching this show would like to schedule you to come and do a workshop in their community about impeachment, teaching people what it's about, letting them know about this campaign, can they reach you through the website?
They can. My contact information is at the website.
And the website again is what?
MaineImpeach.org.
Okay.
Yeah, we're very anxious for that to happen. There are probably about 10 of us, some of which would be able to make any event that might come up, any opportunity.
A minute ago, you said that over 50% of the American people nationally are now saying that they would support investigations for impeachable offenses. So your sense then is that the American people are becoming more and more open to this whole idea of impeachment?
Yes, absolutely. I think as things have gone from bad to worse for this administration, as we've seen the consequences of what they've been doing, that more and more people are waking up. And again, I think that the media is also demonstrating that they are becoming a bit more receptive to the clear, in our minds, the very clear arguments that we're making that things have really gone awry here. One of the things that troubles me the most is, as I look at what the consequences have been of the Bush-Cheney administration, is the diminishing stature that our country enjoys or now suffers around the world. The drop in affection for Americans, not just American administration or American government now, now the impact of what Bush and Cheney have done, in my mind, has impacted the way people around the world think about Americans, and the drop has been really precipitous.
They're losing respect for us as people because we're allowing this whole thing to continue on in our name, really.
That's absolutely the case. And for that reason, again, I think we ought to be engaged in this sort of thing. One of the very profound observations made at the meeting last week, one of the speakers spoke out about he was sick and tired of being a silent German, basically in reference to the Germans whom we might accuse of having been silent during the Holocaust years in World War II. And it's beginning to feel that way in this country, too, that if we don't speak out, then we are deserving of the government we get, and we are not deserving of the respect of the rest of the world.
You know, for me, one of the key issues is the Constitution. We have a Constitution that has provisions for impeachment for presidents who betray their oath of office. And on the back of this flyer that you have created, it says 10 reasons for impeachment investigations of George W. Bush and Richard B. Cheney. And you spell out 10 different, which you consider to be violations of their constitutional authority, if you will. Talk to me about that whole issue of if we're going to have a Constitution, then we have to take impeachment seriously because the Constitution essentially requires that we investigate people that have violated their very oath.
Certainly, obviously, I wholeheartedly agree with that. I mean, the Constitution was set up by our forefathers who were very concerned about the royal prerogative that the King of England was taking with respect to the United States. And now we have a leader who is, in effect, acting as a king. He's establishing, or trying to establish this is one of the articles of impeachment that we would call for. He's establishing what we would call the unitary executive authority. So he is diminishing the voice that Congress has, or the legislative department has, and the judicial department as well. So it's beginning to look more and more as if we have a monarchy.
Well, we're going to take a break for a second. I'm talking with Dud Hendrick, who lives in Deer Isle. He's a member of Maine Veterans for Peace, an organization that I also belong to. We're friends from that organization, but he's also a leader of this new group that's sprung up in the state called MaineImpeach.org. And they are now organizing this campaign across the state to gather 10,000 signatures of Mainers on this website saying that you're in favor of investigations of Bush and Cheney for impeachable offenses. So if you're interested in supporting this, please go to the website MaineImpeach.org. Well, let's talk, Dud, about yourself for a moment. Where did you go to college?
I went to the Naval Academy.
U.S. Naval Academy.
I went to the Naval Academy. I graduated many years ago, 1963, and I transferred into the Air Force. Uh-huh. And I spent 4 years in the Air Force and was in Vietnam. I volunteered to go to Vietnam. I think that experience has a great deal to do with my distress, if not, in fact, outrage with what is going on today. I felt, in retrospect, after my service in Vietnam, that my friends had been killed in Vietnam as a result of having been duped by failed leadership. I felt that I had been duped, and I feel that we Americans are being duped today in what is now another war into which we have been brought based on lies, just as Vietnam was the case.
And from there, after your service in the military?
And then became the coach at Dartmouth. After I worked for a short time for E.I. DuPont de Nemours, I was an explosives tech rep for DuPont, and then came back and became a coach at Dartmouth. And
then for 20 years, you were an innkeeper at Deer Isle. You had a bed and breakfast, a very well-known bed and breakfast on Deer Isle for many, many years.
That's right, yeah.
So you really came from another world, if you will. Not a world of activism in those early years. You were a businessman, you were a college coach, you were a veteran. And what is it that made you then go from that world and take the dive into politics that you're so heavily involved in today?
Well, it certainly was a gradual transformation, but there was a pivotal event that had a very transformative effect on me, and that was a return to Vietnam in 1998. I had the great privilege of going there with an organization called World Team Sports. And TEAM stands for, in this case, The Exceptional Athlete Matters, and exceptional refers to disabled athletes. And in 1998, we had a group of about 100 veterans of the Vietnam War, to include Vietnamese and Americans, former enemies, who bicycled from Hanoi to Saigon, about 1,200 miles. And as you would expect, it was a profound experience. There were tears every evening as we connected with our fellow man, and I think it was through that experience that I became so appreciative of the fact that we are all brothers, that we all were the victims of failed leadership, both Vietnamese and Americans.
And now today, as you look at Iraq, how do you feel about that situation in Iraq as you look back through the mirror of your own experience in Vietnam?
Well, I can see so clearly the attitudes and notions and beliefs that the young people in Iraq today, young Americans in Iraq today, are embracing as those that I lived with when I was in Vietnam. I thought it was
buying the whole line.
That's right.
Accepting the
advancing democracy, helping the Vietnamese people in the case of the 60s and the 70s. And that's, in my opinion, that's the misunderstanding that we have today on the parts of the service people in Iraq.
We're beginning to see a growing number of American GIs actually beginning to pull away, though, from that acceptance. They're moving into action. There's a group of veterans that have just been having their own petition that they've got a considerable number of active duty GIs signed. They're bringing it to Washington. They held a press conference in recent days. They're beginning to participate in demonstrations. Lieutenant Aaron Watada, the first officer, you were an officer, by the way, correct? What rank were you when you were in the...
I was a captain in the Air Force when I got out.
Captain. So the first officer who's now refused to go to Iraq. So we are beginning to see a growing number of American GIs, veterans, refusing to be involved in this, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. You yourself, having been a veteran, know how difficult it is within the culture, within the military world, to look outside of it. It is so all-embracing. It is so pervasive. The attitudes and beliefs and feelings, sort of out of a necessity to survive within the culture. You have to embrace it. So it is very difficult for these people to come to conclusions that are contrary to that which the party line would have you believe.
Tell us again, someone might have just checked in on the show and didn't hear our earlier discussion about the petition campaign that you're now organizing at MaineImpeach.org. Tell us a little bit more about what this petition is all about, how it works, how people can get involved.
Okay, through MaineImpeach.org, if you'll go to that website, MaineImpeach.org, we are asking you to sign a petition that is asking our state legislators to debate and vote on a resolution that would call for the House of Representatives and the U.S. Congress to investigate the Bush-Cheney administration. We're hoping to get some 10,000 signatures. We're doing this by way of word of mouth, basically. We have no budget whatsoever right now, so we're definitely looking for donations to this effort. We have this so-called palm card that we're distributing, and we're finding as we go along the streets and stand on street corners that people are very, very receptive to this. It's the exception now for an individual to express disinterest or objection to the campaign. Most people are accepting it, and they're in fact asking for several cards and passing them along to their neighbors. Through the campaign, we're also offering impeachment workshops around the country, around the state, I should say. So we have now had 3 or 4 of these, and if any communities are out there, any groups are out there that would like to have one of us or a few of us come to present a movie titled How to Impeach a President, it's been put together by the Center for Constitutional Rights. We'd be happy to do so and to tell you more about the campaign.
Let's talk about Iraq for a moment. Bush has recently announced that he wants to send more troops to Iraq. The Congress is showing a little bit of restiveness here around this, but it appears that the Congress will end up voting in favor of another $100 billion for the occupation of Iraq for the fiscal year 2007. Already the Congress has voted almost $500 billion. We're now spending $8.5 billion a month on the occupation of Iraq. And as you said earlier, that's money that could be used back here in our home state and other states to take care of health care and fixing roads and bridges and a lot of other things, education. But that money is being really poured down a rat hole. What do we do about Iraq? How do we get the politicians? And what do you see the connection between the impeachment campaign and bringing the troops home from Iraq? How do you connect those two things?
Mm-hmm. Well, I strongly believe that the message that our leaders should have heard in the November elections was that Americans no longer want to be in Iraq, and they want accountability of their leaders. And I believe that before the elections, it was evident that the Democrats were a little bit reluctant to embrace those issues because they saw them as perhaps being too divisive, too polarizing. And we're concerned that there might be a backlash, I believe. But there were some who were sticking their heads out. John Murtha was one. John Conyers was another. And since right before the elections, you might recall that the new House majority, the new Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, suggested that impeachment was off the table. Well, it really is not her call. It's the call of the House Judiciary Committee. And it really is the call of the people. It's the people who can make this happen. So I think it's incumbent upon the people to make it clear to our leaders that what is going on is not acceptable. We won't be silent Germans. We won't stand for what is going on. We want accountability. We want these people to be investigated, and we want our troops out of Iraq. And I believe that the louder and the more we speak, the more likely the politicians will be to follow. If the people will lead, we believe the leaders will follow.
Dud, on top of the mess in Iraq, there's now growing fear and growing evidence that the Bush administration, working with Israel, is planning to attack Iran and maybe even Syria. What do you think about that? What's your sense of that whole situation?
Well, it does seem evident that they're headed in that direction, doesn't it? And just as I have to credit George Bush for making an activist out of me, I know that what he began doing from the very time he took office engaged and inflamed me. I believe that this new direction that he's taken, one more war, one more front, is going to inflame many other people. It seems to me that there's been quite a bit of grassroots reaction to Bush calling for troop increase and to Bush rattling the sabers with respect to Iran and Syria. So as wrong as it is, as ill-directed as it seems to be, it does seem that there is a silver lining, that this will inflame the general public. We won't stand for another war.
If Bush attacks Iran, what do you think will be the result, though?
From all reports, it sounds to me like it's going to be a conflagration in the Middle East altogether, doesn't it? A world out of control, a war out of control. And
do you think Bush wants that? Do you think he wants a sort of endless war?
I'd like not to think that. I think that he is messianic in his beliefs, that he in fact does believe these things, that he's doing the right thing and doesn't believe that diplomacy is the right way to go. I take great exception to that.
Well, we're almost out of time. I want to give you about 2 minutes for a closing. Anything you would like to say to the folks watching, please do.
I would petition listeners to take a look at our website, maineimpeach.org, and look at the 10 issues on which we are asking for investigation. Look at each of them, and look at the consequences that each of them have with respect to our welfare here in this country. Look at it with respect to how safe it may or may not make our country, how safe it may or may not make the world. And if you believe that, in fact, what Bush and Cheney have done and are proposing to continue to do is contrary to the interests of we Americans and the people of the world, please sign this petition and go a step further. Ask your neighbors to do the same. Take up the cause. Help us in this movement. These people can be held accountable. Their crimes are certainly of great more consequence than the sexual picadillos of President Clinton. So we would hope that all of your listeners might take up the maineimpeach.org campaign. Thank you, Bruce.
Well, Dud, thank you very much for coming on the show. I appreciate having you.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
And thank you for watching another edition of This Issue. Until next time, good luck to you all, and please get organized.